Hey you guys, and welcome back to another YouTube video. In this video I'll be going through my trade targets for round 20 and going through who I think is almost not a necessity at this point, but pretty much we can start narrowing down and seeing who actually has the best fixtures, because it's not necessarily everyone doesn't play anyone like throughout the season, etc. Now, to the point that you can look for those West Coast, North Melbourne, Hawthorn, Richmond for those midfielders, I guess, still a little bit, but I need to double check. With that, as a matter of fact, I'll bring up the DFS Australian website as well to help out those positioning ones, especially because Richmond have probably changed over the last 5 weeks. But we can go through who is the best matchups, etc. As looking right now here at Richmond, they're actually a bad matchup now that they've turned their form. St Kilda is given an easy matchup. Sydney's actually a really bad matchup now for midfielders. But we can look at those guys that we are actually good matchups and see who we really should be targeting the teams against, etc. So before we go into the video, remember to like and subscribe, turn the notification bell on, so that you know when I upload, as it can be slightly different times, but it's usually somewhere between that 12 to 3 p.m. I think this one will be uploaded 1 or 2 p.m. on the Thursday, and then my predictions at 3 or so around that time. And then you have my team preview, which will be recorded on the Thursday, on Thursday. That'll be uploaded on the Friday. So that may have signs that it's pre-recorded, obviously, that there won't be anyone confirmed playing, but it should be fine, because I'm pretty sure no one was listed on the injury report that I can remember from my teams from going through that. So anyway, let's get into the video. So as you can see here, I have this set up for last 5 games averages, and really looking inside mids, we're looking at, don't really like the Carlton match. We'll really look at the players that the good matchup is obviously North, West Coast and St Kilda at the moment. Other than that, every matchup is pretty bad or not that favourable. And then I thought Richmond was actually a good matchup, but as you can see now, in the last 5, it's turned. It's flipped on its head, and Richmond's actually a really bad matchup, and I'm pretty sure this will show pretty even. Yeah, that's how good of a matchup they were previously, that it was evens, and how Collingwood's actually turned up to be sort of a bad matchup in the last little bit, now that they've tightened up. And for Ruckman perspective, we're still looking at West Coast, Port Adelaide and North as a good matchup. The Swans have started to dip a little bit, as they were, if we look at the last 10, they were pretty bad as well, as in a good matchup to face +8, and now they're plus, I think 4 did we see? Is that what it is? Or +6? So they've dropped in the last 10 weeks, obviously, and dropped a little bit. So they were about a +10 or +12 beforehand in the 5 previous, in the before this last 5. So those are really the 2 positions we're looking at, and you can see here with wing defenders are sort of also the guys that we're looking at. General defenders and aren't really looked at, and designated kickers are sort of as well what we look at. So we're looking at wing defenders and designated defenders are sort of the guys that we're looking at, as well as fantasy scorers. So if you look at wing defenders, you're looking at Adelaide, Essendon and North again. West Coast are a little bit down. And then designated kickers, you're looking at Western Bulldogs, Sydney, which is actually a surprising thing, but I think that is partly because Clark hasn't played a dramatic effect in these last couple games, and then also Carlton. But most teams are actually pretty decent in giving away points to designated kickers. So players like Nick Dacos, who plays Carlton, who actually, I believe Nick Dacos will actually be considered an inside mid, but you could consider him a designated kicker, or not necessarily a wing defender. But those stats are positive, and it really will hinge on if Kerno's playing. If Kerno's not playing, then I think Nick Dacos is VC potential. But if he is, if Kerno does get named tonight, then I would stay clear of him, and I'd be going for some of the for the Bont and stuff like that, as the Bont has GWS, and GWS here are probably going to be really negative. Now they're plus 0.41. And they're pretty bad in the ruck in the last 5, so I wouldn't actually probably go for English. But we'll have to wait and see on that front who they name in the ruck. But I'm pretty sure it will be Briggs again. So there's that. So now let's go into the players, and then we'll also see who their matchup is and sort of flick between the two screens to see who is the best matchup. So Steele, I'm pretty sure is still low owned, as in he's 20% owned. He plays Hawks. If we look at the Hawks here, Hawks are minus 0.92%. So that's actually not the best matchup. I mean, they've improved dramatically, I'm pretty sure, as they were a leaky midfield team previously, 2.45, meaning that they were probably +5 in the 5 before that. So they've dropped quite dramatically now, probably even close to the +6, +7 range now, that they're minus 0.92. I still think he's a matchup that you can take advantage of, because he has last 3 of 128, last 5 of 115, and he's only going to rise. And I know that this is becoming a point now in the season where a lot of people aren't really, you can sort of get to anyone with the way that your bench is formed. Being there's a lot of those 380k or so players like Chesser, Long, anyone else that's around 380k that I can remember. But if I look here at all prices, 300k. If I look at price, you've got not Pickett, no one else here really. Not Clark, no one would have Clark. No one would have anyone here. Roses, Curtis, man, it's hard to see. Butler probably no one has. Chesser, a lot of people would have. Noah Long, a lot of people would have. Jug McVie, I think, is still highly owned, 20% owned, so he's up there. Francis shouldn't be owned at all, 0.8. Mac Andrew, 0.46, as I would have thought. So yeah, there's a couple here, and Hewitt as well is there around that 368. You got Samson Ryan for the 28%, but those are probably dead teams. You got Marek as well, so a lot of players around that 300 or so K, as well as those 400 to 500k players, such as Oscar Baker, still probably 1% owned. Cameron Franklin, Wardlaw as well for a lot of people still that would have him. So there's still so many players there that you can look at and use to get pretty much any player in the game. As you have a lot of 800, 700, 600k guys. Like I'm looking at Himmelberg or Darcy Cameron next week to Sarong, and that is a 200k jump. But hopefully with Sarong's break even or Butters or something like that, I can still make that jump because they have a higher break even, and if they can have a 100 gain, that drops them by 15k or something like that, and I'll be able to, with Darcy Cameron, hopefully be able to make up 10k. I'd also have like 40k in the kitty basically, which a lot of people have somewhere around there at least. And as there's not really any rookie options per se other than Nankervis this week, and I might actually jump down to just 200k guy. As I probably also do want another red dot, as that will really actually help me with getting my captaincy, as well as covering for players with like Windhager, etc. I think I do want to have the risk of a guy getting a red dot, so that will help. So going down to a 200k guy, saving another 30k, will enable me to be able to get Sarong no matter of any break-even split or anything other than a guy going like 20-25 or something like that. So a lot of people are able to get all these guys. You've got Bond here, 1.05. I think he's needed if you want to be able to push, and 30% owned, so there's still a lot of leeway with that. Marshall is like 45% owned, 46. He's slowly but surely creeping up. There was a say to go for Gorn, but we'll have to wait and see if Campbell is named on the bench or whatever, or if Marshall's out, as it doesn't look like he's out at the moment, but could easily be out later down the track. You got Gorn. Javis Juniak is someone, so as I was saying with Gorn, I think he is certainly a guy that you can target. Doesn't look like Grundy's going to be playing by the news coming out today. So I think he certainly is an option playing Richmond. I mean, Richmond does have a ruck that is giving up minus 21. They're not really giving anything, but that is Soldo. And I don't know exactly who Richmond have played recently, but I would say it's not any easy or hard matchups. They played Hawthorn and I believe Sydney recently as well, so they haven't really had a ruckman to challenge, to be honest. Gorn Davies-Uniacke is another guy that I think you can target, but he does have this Eagles matchup, but then has Melbourne, and then 3 easier matchups, I think, against Essendon, Richmond, and Gold Coast. If we look at Essendon plus 0.7, Gold Coast is -2, and Richmond, as we said, minus 5.71, and whereas Melbourne is minus 1.48. So he has one of the tough matchups in Richmond, but I wouldn't be surprised if that turns around a little bit. But it's LDU, and he's running a 96 average, but I expect him to go 110 for the closeout for the year. Dawson is so highly owned. Gordon, highly owned. Oliver's still 2 to 3 weeks away, I think. Houston, I think, is a pod that you can almost go with now, as he's playing Adelaide, Geelong, Giants, Freo, and Richmond. If we go to Adelaide, and he's sort of, I would classify him as a designated kicker, minus 0.22. Geelong here, they are running minus 0.29. You've also got Giants, they're running +3. You've got Freo, and Freo are running +2. And then you've also got Richmond as well, and Richmond are running -5. So he's basically, by those metrics, I believe, going to run around a 93 or so average. But I think he can push that up, honestly. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does. So I think he's certainly an option. Sarong is definitely an option, and the guy that I'm looking at next week. He's got 2 favourable matchups, I believe, or did we say the Hawks wasn't that? Hawks, I still think, is definitely a favourable matchup. I wouldn't be surprised if they start playing rookies in the last 5 weeks to give them a little bit more experience. And he has Port and the Eagles as well, and Port Adelaide are actually a tough matchup, but the Eagles are such a good matchup. But I think playing North is actually North and St Kilda and the Eagles. You got to try and find a team that has those 3 games, and that's certainly a play to go for. Rory Laird has the Eagles in round 24, so I think that's a matchup that a lot of people will jump on for the last round of the year. You've got Doherty as well. I think he's got an easier run. He's got the St Kilda, which St Kilda are sort of fantasy relevant, especially for his designated kicker and also the inside mid and the wing role that he does play. So all 3 positions are hitting well. So if you wanted to go for that next week, I think that's an option. He does have Collingwood, and Collingwood are, if he plays that wing defender, that's sort of tough for him, and I think he's designated to play that. But he's also designated kicker and inside mid are a little bit up on averages, but nothing terribly high. English Cogs as well, but he's like 50% owned almost. Nick Dacos is fine. Luke Ryan, I'm a little bit iffy on, but I mean, he's done well on the last 3 of 110. I think it's just the point that I don't want to touch my defenders anymore at the moment. Parrish, I think, was a good pickup, as well as having, does he have the 3 easy? He's got the 2 easiest, and then he's got the Swans and the Giants. And from memory, the Swans are a tough matchup. GWS are pretty much even, and then you've got the 2 easy matchups in Eagles and North. Tim Taranto so highly owned. Darcy out for the year, which could raise questions about Luke Jackson. And if we look at the ruck department against Geelong, they're -6, so I wouldn't be going for Jackson. Wayne Malira against Hawthorn. If we look at Hawthorn's numbers again, +8, so he could be an option. And they also have got, where is Wayne Malira? They've got Carlton, Richmond, Geelong, and Brisbane. So I'm looking at offloading Brad Crouch for these last 2 games, probably to Rory Laird, as I think Rory Laird has a comfortable schedule the last 2 weeks. From memory, if we go back to Laird here and we look at last 2 of Swans and Eagles, I think that's a comfortable schedule. So I think that's just a better schedule for him. And then Kerno, I think, is just a key forward, having a couple of bags. Liberatore, I think, is a good option as well. Has the two of the easier games, I think, still in the Hawks. I still think they're an easy side, and I think they will fall away a little bit. Does have Richmond, who have, obviously, as we've talked about, ramped it up a little bit, but I do think that they still are an easier matchup. Petrarca, who does he have? You could go Petrarca. He's got the North matchup as well, and the Hawks and the Swans. He has an actual pretty easy run home, so I think he could be in target. And then we're starting to get to the guys that are averaging like 103, 104. Is there anyone else here really? Flanders, I think, could be a pod that you could go for. I think with the midfield time that he's getting, I think he's doing well enough. 99 last 3, that's just because of its 67. If he gets another 90, that goes up to, I believe, somewhere around that 105 or 106. So I think he's certainly a guy that you could look at. And I don't think there's anyone really down here that you can look at and say comfortably that they're going to score well. We look at last round, just Kerno, Laverde, Steele did all right, obviously, Doherty, Bond. Parker did all right. And could you look at him? I don't necessarily think so. I think there's too much movement in that Swans midfield with Warner coming back last week. You've got Rowbottom, Mills, even Goulden in there at points. I'm probably forgetting someone as well. They've got so many guys in that midfield that I don't think Parker is a reliable scorer as he was last year towards the end of it. Willem Drew we didn't talk about, but I don't think he's a reliable scorer. I mean, if you look at his stats here, 79, 70, 92, 117, his big scores are always when he comes up with 8+ tackles. As you can see here, 10, an 89 with 10, a 102 with 8, a 106 with 10, 92 with 7 tackles as well, 78 with 9, and then a 16 tackle effort against the Pies for a 117. And then the last guy I want to probably talk about in this video is Harry Sheezel. I think he certainly does have the matchup against the Eagles, but then has he's got Melbourne, which I think will be a difficult run. Then he's got Essendon, and Essendon are a plus 3.7, so that's a relatively easy run. He's got Richmond, and Richmond are -5. And then he's got the Gold Coast, and Gold Coast are +2. Where are Melbourne sitting? Melbourne are +0.4, so they're pretty much evens. So I wouldn't be picking Sheezel just because of this Eagles game, but I do think that there was some value there, him going up against the Hawks and the Saints. So I do think there was value there that I probably did miss from not looking at the splits, I guess, per position per opponent. So I guess I missed a little bit of value there. But I would be looking to move on Sheezel after probably this round, or potentially because this Melbourne game is a tough game. And I think, what did we say with Essendon? Or we said Richmond at least was a tough game. So I'd be looking to move him on for rounds 23 and 24 at least. But that is basically the video. I mean, I could look at the 200k guys quickly. Banks, I think, is a little bit too far out of the price ranges of a lot of you guys, especially because you're trying to make... You're trying to be able to make those massive upgrades, and getting a guy who's 270k, yes, he does have a good break even, but you're not really looking for a guy to make much money at this point, as you've already got your avenues up to those top players. So I think Luke Nankervis, if he does play, is the best option, and that's why I brought him in, because at 230k, he's going to provide some, I guess, he's going to provide a potential to score off the bench if you do need it. But he's also saving you 40k on Banks, and he's got a much better average, obviously, and did score slightly worse than last week, but I do think he's going to become better in the Adelaide clash with Port. And I do think that if you do need to, I think we will get a 200k guy debut or somewhere around there, and also you can obviously just trade in a red dot to help out your cause if needed. So that is basically the video, as there isn't anyone else that you really need to think about in this lot of players. So if I go back to the main screen, that's my trade targets video, a longer-ish video, as there was, I guess at this point you're trying to decipher between matchups, etc., and who's got the easy ones, obviously, and the tougher runs home, and if a player's actually playing well at that point. So it becomes more of a matchup-based thing rather than players playing well, as you've got so many people clumped around that 105 or so range. So it's trying to find that guy that's going to go 110, 115 in the run home. And I probably have said a guy that's not that good that's going to go on a run, but from what I can see stats-wise, it doesn't. The guys that I mentioned should go on. The guys that I mentioned positively should go on a run. So anyway, that's the video, and later today will be my predictions video for round 20. And then my team preview I'll record on the Thursday, and that will be released on the Friday. Thanks guys, goodbye.